Welcome back for this part 2 about demystifying the coaching industry. Let's jump in. Randall, 3 types of coaches, 4. I'm sure there's more. And there's another one we can talk about. What are your thoughts on group coaching? And when would you suggest someone pick in that lane over a one-on-one and relationship?
So there's two pros, if you will, to group coaching. Number one is it's often less expensive than private individual coaching. Why? Because everyone's paying a certain fee, and the fee can be reduced, and there's more leverage for the person who's leading that particular group. Very often, group coaching is done as a cohort that sort of goes through a particular process, or is got a particular objective to achieve at the end of that coaching process. Excuse me. So it's number one, it's often cheaper. Number two, there's sometimes a defined end, which kind of sounds like consulting or training, but it's still called group coaching. The other advantage for group coaching is that you learn from your peers, or at least other people in the cohort, which, by the way, is very good, so long as you've got lots of very good people in that cohort. Because if you're learning from people who, frankly, are not very good, you're just going to be embedding or modeling on those things that other people don't have. And by the way, they're paying the same amount to be part of the group coaching to learn from the coach, the person who's presumably done it all before or knows how to do it. So there's some value. Some group coaching is sort of put together almost as a mastermind meeting of equals, and in that particular case, that perhaps everyone's is vetted to a certain point to be in there. And that's another kind of mechanism of group coaching. The downside of group coaching is twofold. Even though everyone agrees and may even sign a legal document saying that whatever happens in the group coaching session is confidential, very often your particular situation, you might not feel comfortable sharing that in an open forum with a bunch of other people. And that's a real challenge with group coaching, because if the purpose of it is to help you move your business to the next level, it could very well be that you have very specific questions because your business is a very specific business, right? So in that particular case, you might not get what you need out of group coaching, which is the major con of many group coaching programs, because it's not individualized. Some of them will say, well, we're a bit of a hybrid. We've got the group coaching experience, but we also have occasional one-on-ones. And sometimes the one-on-ones are with a sub-coach, somebody who's less experienced, but at least it's a one-on-one. Usually, some coaching companies might use that as a training mechanism to train their junior people to be a group leader at some particular point, right? But if you get a little bit of one-on-one on it, that's fine. Whether it's enough one-on-one, that's a bit of a question. But no, group coaching can really work, okay? But it's not the very same, and you just need to know what you actually want. It's certainly far more profitable for the coach, that's for sure.
There's all kinds of coaches, all kinds of clients. We know that every client is different. Every business is different. Their priorities, relationships with partners, clients, it's all different. But for the human mind that wants to see patterns, Randall, help me understand. If we look at your coaching relationships and the arc of that client journey at 3,000 feet, is it possible to create like a predictable arc journey of that life cycle? Or is my mind trying to create a pattern where there isn't one? When we think about group coaching and that formula, there is that formula. But when you're off those scripts and it's just driven by the growth of the company and their problems, is there an arc, or it's not there?
Oh, there absolutely is an arc, but there's also a bit of an issue here. When somebody comes in, and I could just talk about my experience, typically what happens at the very beginning, the first number of sessions, 2, 3, 4, 5, there's usually a lot of low-hanging fruit. There's a lot of pent-up questions, issues, opportunities. And a lot of the conversation is dealing with those low-hanging fruit items. Gee, we need a new CFO. Gee, we've got an issue with financing. Gee, we need to relook at our marketing. Gee, I've got an issue with such and so. We need a channel strategy. There's a technology issue. Gee, the website is oh, we've got a problem with this. And so the first number of sessions are batting those down, right? Because those are the things that are top of mind of the leader. And during that time, two things happen. Those issues get addressed. And number two, as a coach, you learn an awful lot more about the business. And at that particular point, you've got a good idea because you haven't talked about a whole bunch of things, and so all of a sudden you sort of flip the role a little bit and you say, well, you know something. Notice we haven't really talked about the CRM. Yet you're not happy with respect to the sales results. You mentioned that several sessions ago. Why don't we sort of drill in to see what's going on? Let me ask you a bunch of questions. And oh, I hadn't thought of that. How about that? So all these questions about that. Well, we've got a white paper on doing such and such. Well, you know something, in an engagement a number of years ago, we saw such and such. Here's a video. You know what? Why don't we convene a meeting with so and so, and we'll just go over such and such. And I just use the example of CRM. Doing pitches. Why don't we do a mock pitch? Okay, or let me sit in on one of your pitch rehearsals. Okay, let's just see what that looks like. Are you using the best in class proposal template right now? Okay, how do you decide on your pricing? How do you deal with such and such? Here you're dealing with reporting. Can we do it faster? Can we do it? So how are you addressing some of the issues? So over time, there is this arc that actually happens. We sort of go through the areas of the business, etc. But we always, at least certainly for me, it's driven by what are the particular priorities of the business and of the leader. But once we know the business and those things are addressed, if you will, then we can start looking at each part of the business. It's a funny thing. One of my most important lessons came as a teenager in business. When I went into a stereo store, I guess like most teenagers, I was crazy about music. I love stereos. And I wanted to get the best sound possible for the music that I liked. And I went into the stereo shop and I said, I'm looking for a new amplifier or something like that. And the guy showed me all these amplifiers. Then he asked a very interesting question. He says, what kind of speakers do you have? And I told them that I was very proud to own a very particular set from Radio Shack, which I had had for a number of years, which were frankly crappy speakers. And he says, well, those are okay speakers, but if you buy this expensive new amplifier, it won't make a difference because the problem is with the speakers. You can get a super tape deck. It won't sound any better because of those crappy speakers. You always want to look at the part of your stereo system that's the weakest or that is not reaching its potential as quickly as it should, etc. And that's where you want to spend your time. And so too, when it comes to growing a business and de-risking a business, the question is where's the weakest link? Or where's the area of the business where there's the greatest opportunity? And certainly as a coach, and in my coaching anyway, that's kind of where the next thing is on that story arc that we want to follow. And as much as I might have a lot of experience, the leader knows an awful lot more about their business than I ever will. They know their history, they kind of know their future, they know their people, they know their industry, the market, everything. They're living it 7x24, and I'm just living it in a much smaller sense. So it becomes this collaborative conversation where you're bringing in ideas and concepts and asking tougher questions in an area where that pushes them in a particular area, and they're able to then, during that time between coaching meetings, make those ideas their own and execute them on their own. If they have difficulty executing, fine, they can hire a consultant to do a particular project, beginning, middle, and end, right? But usually there's good people around them, right? Same thing with respect to, sometimes they can't talk about things in front of a board yet because the idea isn't fully baked, right? So listen, having sat on boards for decades, I've heard plenty of ideas that probably needed a little bit more baking time, right? And it was great to sort of see the CEO's kind of thought process. But on the other hand, I really wish that they didn't waste their time with stuff that really could have had a little bit more thought beforehand, right? So maybe there's something there as well, right? So, it really depends on where, but there is an arc. And the coach can play a role in it if they've got the right experience and knowledge to help.
You talked earlier about egoism and sometimes machoism that exists that keep leaders from, trying a coach because they have a certain opinion of it. But what about the nature of leaders to feel like they want to hold control? And we've spoken with people who, yes, they're coaching curious, but they don't want to commit. They have their reservations, and perhaps it's because they don't see what's coming ahead. They don't understand what's going to be in the coaching relationship. They don't know what's going to happen 3, 6, 12 months from now. Is it normal to lack that clarity because the future is unknown, or is that lack of clarity there because the coach didn't properly communicate what's going to happen? Can assurances be made?
Oh my God. So there's so much to unpack in that question. Number one, I don't think it's a question of control. Okay, because the coach is an external entity that's there to assist. Okay, they're not an internal actress, if you will. That you know they don't report to the way a subordinate would report to a boss, for example. So let's take the control issue on the other side. The other point that you brought up, which is actually a really good one, is what are the guarantees? And might that be the reason why somebody doesn't want to, the coaching curious, as you call it, doesn't want to commit. I had a situation where somebody said, I'm not so sure you've got the knowledge to be able to help me. So I said, well, you can certainly, why don't I send you a bunch of my books? Okay, and send you a few of my articles. You get a sense of how I think, rather than just what I've done. But yeah, you can look at what I've done. And by the way, here's my client list, and here's a whole bunch of, look at my LinkedIn recommendations. And by the way, why don't you talk to some of my clients? Like, these are the kinds of answers that one would expect, right? To sort of reduce the apprehension that perhaps that coach doesn't know what they're doing, or that they can't sort of move things along. But let's be very clear. The job of the CEO is to produce results, or whoever's being coached, is to, the job of the coach is to help make that happen. Okay, by empowering that CEO with either new skills or ideas or perspective or whatever it happens to be. But there can't be a guarantee from a coach that if you work with us, okay, you will be able to double your sales, right? Because the coach is not there 40 hours, 60 hours a week. The CEO is, and that's one of the biggest challenges. So there is I don't want to, I don't know if the word is leap of faith, right? But what everything's a question of risk and probabilities. What's the probability of you reaching that particular milestone of whatever you're hoping to do? Double the sales, okay, or expand to this new whatever. What's the probability of success with the coach or without the coach, right? And if you think the probability is with the coach and without the coach is exactly the same, do not hire the coach. It'd be a bad move to hire the coach. But if you think on the balance of probabilities that the risk of failure is going to be reduced significantly, or the probability of success is going to increase significantly, that's probably why you want to hire the coach. And the coach will make a difference.
So that asked about getting into coaching. Let's talk about getting out of coaching. As we know, all good things must come to an end. People get gym memberships and cancel them. They take tennis lessons and they stop their lessons. So in the same way, people get business coaches and then stop those coach relationships. So there's value in going to the gym, value in taking lessons, and certainly value in business coaching. But talk to me about that discontinuing of the coaching relationship. Is it reasonable enough to say people get too busy, they've learned what they can learn here, or they stop seeing value, or are there other factors at play? Like, in your view, what is the sweet goodbye, the appropriate goodbye, or inappropriate goodbye for a coaching client?
So let me first answer the question from the coach, from the coach's perspective. And what I would say there is, you don't want to be coaching unless you're making a difference. And the idea of firing a client because they're not moving stuff along, however that's defined, is something that every coach should consider, in the same way that every client should consider, am I getting value from this coach? Or are they just really not adding more value, is good at some point and no good at the other? From the coach's perspective again, oh my God, at least in my case, so much time is invested up front. Okay, going through every single one of the client's documents, okay, writing copious notes, sort of mapping out a whole bunch of different ideas and thoughts and everything. And that happens at the very beginning, often before the first coaching call itself. Okay, but it takes so much time. So if you're going to invest all this time, right, most coaches will say, well, I need a 12-month contract. Why? Because you want to amortize that time over a longer period. And by the way, if you just have one coaching meeting, it's unlikely to build lasting change on whatever dimension. So if that's from the coach's perspective, from the client's perspective, it would be okay. So let's just make sure that we continue to get value out of it, so that at the end of that 1 year, you have an open, frank discussion, which is, how's it going? Now, this should happen not just at the very end of the year, because there's always, mid-course corrections that kind of happen along the way as you start to work more closely together. But at the end of the year, it should be a more formal conversation, which is, from the coach's perspective, I don't think I can help you anymore. Or I think we're near the end of our how much value I'm able to bring. Or the coaches says, I think that we need another year together, or whatever it happens to be. And from the client's perspective, gee, Mr. or Ms. Coach, I think we're at the end of our relationship. I don't think that we're gonna try it without training wheels for a year. Excuse me. Or you know what, this has been good. I learned a lot and wanted to thank you for your service. That's it, right? Like that, there has to be that kind of conversation about the coaching value that you're having at a certain point. Usually at the end of the year, and at that point, either you sign up for another year or you don't. And the yes and no can come from the client, or they can come from the coach. The best coaches are the ones who will be honest about it and say, I think we're at the end. I'll say that there's also another path as well. It could very well be at the very end of the 12 months or the 24 months or whatever. You don't need them as often, but because they know your organization, that there's value in having a retained relationship. In which case you say, you know what I'd like to do is I'd like to continue the relationship, but on a bi-monthly or quarterly basis. Maybe, teeing up to, your quarterly planning cycle. Or, gee, I don't need once a month now. I need every 2 months. I just want the ability to tap in. And this is a structured way to make sure that actually happens, right? So there's also that third path, etc. And then once again, at the end of that 12 months or 24, it's that conversation. How's it going? Is there value being exchanged here? Okay, let's take a look at what some of the things that we discussed over the year. So that would be my perspective on it.
Randall, we talked theory, different types of coaches. Let's talk practical. Let's talk fees. We know that every industry, there are lower priced and higher priced service providers. From your perspective, what considerations go into how coaches set their rates? Help us understand.
Huh. There's really three aspects, and this is a pricing conversation, excuse me, for any business, not just the coaching business. Number one is what's the value relative to the problem? So for example, let's just say there's an awful lot at risk. There's a huge business opportunity with this particular client. And let's just say the value of that is $1 million. Well, thank you very much. No, let's say the value of that opportunity risk is $10,000. No client would spend 20,000 or 50,000 or 70,000 on coaching to solve a $10,000 risk issue or growth potential issue. It just makes no sense, right? On the other hand, if it's $1 million opportunity or $1 million risk issue, etc., spending $50,000, $100,000 is not a problem. Because if you're able to address that, then it's a great ROI, if you will, right? So that is one aspect of the pricing. Okay, the second is, excuse me, what does and then this is less of an issue for most coaches, but how much do I need to live? The amount of money and time that most coaches spend on their own professional development and just keeping their business going is not zero, not at all, especially with better coaches. So there's a certain minimum amount that helps keep the lights on. So you know you can't go below that. So as a coach, you know what that is. Just like as a business leader, you know what your the cost basis of yours. And the third is kind of more of a competitive thing, right? If all the other coaches at your level are charging, say, $5,000 a month, and you're charging $8,000 a month, you're not going to get any business, or you'll rarely get business. On the other hand, if you're charging $2,000 a month, where everybody else is at the same, who's doing the same kind of thing is charging 5,000, I'm just choosing these numbers off the top of my head. People will think, well, gee, that you are not that experienced because you're seemingly pricing yourself at somebody who has a lot less experience as a coach. So therefore, you have a lot less experience. So pricing is a signal with respect to the particular experience level that you actually have, right? There's a fourth side. These are all, by the way, internal to the consultant pricing decisions. But the other side of the question is, what's the client's budget? So I'm not the cheapest coach around. I'm certainly not the most expensive. But I've had some clients who say, you know what, I really want to work with you. And I just can't afford that particular rate. Perhaps next year I'll be able to. Well, thank you very much. Okay, I really like this client. I like the people. I think I could make a huge difference. It's a fun business. There's huge potential. So I can choose. Maybe I'll give them a special deal. Or maybe what I'll do is I'll say, well, you know what? Maybe there's a performance aspect of it. Okay, options or shares or something like that. Or maybe there's some other clever way of addressing the deal. Okay, to make it accessible to those particular. In my particular case, I've got two different prices, one for larger organizations, one for startups and very small organizations. Right. And so, the other part of pricing is a question of integrity. Generally speaking, you want to charge the clients the same kind of thing. You don't want to have pricing that's all over the place. Right. But, you also have to take into account what the client can afford. Right. And, there's a story a management consultant told me once that they walked into a client's office the very first time, and they had two copies of the proposal in their briefcase. Remember briefcases? It's an old story. And depending on their assessment of what they thought the client would afford, they would take out one proposal or they'd take out the other one. And I was absolutely shocked. I thought that was terribly unethical. The cost is what the cost is. But let's face it, there's some clients who can't afford. That as a coach, you might say, well, let me see if I can find a way to make it accessible. Right. And there's some clients as a coach that you really, really, really don't want to work with. And you say, well, if they want to work with me, gee, I'm going to charge them double the fee. If they still want to pay that, then I could do it. For me, I never follow that approach because you have to enjoy your job, right? And you've got to enjoy the people that you work with. And just taking money from somebody and you don't enjoy the experience, or you dislike or have an issue with their industry, is not a particularly ethical way to do it. For me, I'm not judging anyone else, but it's an interesting thing. If somebody is a very, very, very difficult prospective client, that's probably how they're going to be when they actually are a signed client. So there's that aspect to it as well.
In terms of pricing strategies and factors, you talked about a coach's level of experience would make that number scale up and down. And interestingly enough, how motivated the coach is to work with that client. There's flexibility there. When there's room in the heart, there's room in the client portfolio, I guess. What about prep time? Randall, we know no one's more experienced than you, and we have tremendous experience to draw on. But when we work with clients, when they bring an issue to the table, we don't sit on our laurels. Things are changing rapidly in every industry. So we are doing research, we're networking, we're finding out best practices, we're learning from our peers' experiences and mistakes, and a lot of prep goes into those 2-hour meetings. Do you think more economical coaches, I'm asking, aren't putting in maybe the same amount of time into the prep so that that's how they're pricing their time less? Is that a factor?
Huh. That's an interesting thing. I have no idea. I have no idea.
You can't know.
Okay, but listen, if you've got an amazing coaching experience, to your point, Rania, it's not a miracle. Something has to happen. Yeah, you've got your experiences. Yeah, you've invested hugely in your own professional development. Yes, there's a bit of a brain trust back at the office you could bounce stuff off of and everything, but it's the huge prep that goes into that particular meeting, okay, as well as some of the follow-up stuff that makes that meeting magical. And yeah, it takes time. I'll also say this, certainly for me as a coach, at the end of a coaching meeting, I'm electrified because it's just such a powerful time. But it's also tiring, right? And I just couldn't do 2-hour coaching meetings back to back to back to back to back. Okay. There needs to be some time to decompress a little bit, to make a whole bunch of notes, to write up some ideas, okay, that you want to percolate on because they may make a difference. You may reach out, between coaching meetings and saying, I've been thinking about this part of our conversation. Here's a bunch of other ideas, or how about this or that? Or does it make sense just to hop on the phone for a few minutes? Wouldn't mind bouncing these. Well, guess what? These ideas take time to generate. They don't come out of nothing. So the idea that some people might not do prep, I couldn't imagine a professional coach that doesn't do a huge amount. But I guess if somebody's not charging so much for coaching, I guess something's got to give. But I have no idea.
We said earlier in the hour that there's so many coaches, anybody can be a coach, all kinds of coaches. And what does it mean to even be a coach anymore? Because it's so exhausted. We do know that there is, various coaching designations out there. That being said, the industry is not regulated. Do you have any thoughts on that, on how easy it is to enter and put up a shingle and call yourself a coach?
Yeah, I do. So if somebody does the traditional accountability style coaching, they absolutely should have a certification from the ICF, International Coaching Federation, right? And there's a hierarchy of things, and that way you at least understand that there's a particular type of methodology to that pure accountability type coaching, right? Same thing with respect to people who coach based on DISC or colors or Myers-Briggs. What are they specifically certified for those kinds of things? For the area of work that I do, this growth coaching, the CEO, C-level coaching that I do, I think the question really is, okay, number one, what are your experiences? How many times have you done that? Who have you done all this with? What are the letters behind your name? Are there a lot of them? And by the way, what have you done recently? And by the way, what kind of third-party recognition do you have for your experience doing those things that you are good at doing it? In my particular case, I'm a CFA, Chartered Financial Analyst. Yeah, I got an MBA. A lot of people have got the MBA. I'm not just a certified management consultant, but I'm a fellow certified management consultant. As a professional communicator, as a speaker, I've been inducted in the Speaking Hall of Fame. Rania, well, both of us have gone through the innovation governance program for board leadership, corporate board leadership. There's a bunch of other letters and certifications behind my name as well, right? So you've got to do your due diligence to make sure that the coach that you want for the purpose that you want is qualified, okay, is recognized, and has got the wherewithal and demonstrated experience in doing what you actually want them to do, right? And I think that's, my sort of, it's a bad joke. Well, just read any of my 8 books. Okay, is kind of a bit of a joke, but it's true. Well, how does that person think? Is there any way that you could test drive? Are there any of these indicators? I will say, one thing certainly for our coaching clients, we've got what, 1,100 plus pieces of IP that are available privately to them. Tools and templates and articles and videos and all that kind of stuff. What kind of intellectual property does the coach actually bring into, proprietary, not written from some franchise coaching organization, but proprietary that came from the actual coach themselves? That way, ask for some copies of them to get a sense as to the breadth of their experience and the depth, right? And these things are certainly in my area of coaching are probably as important as the certifications and the third-party recognitions and everything, because that way you can see for yourself, okay, yeah, this is if I'm renting the brain cells of this particular person, if they're going to be the ones asking me these questions or coming up with these ideas, at least I'll understand kind of what that base actually is and where it's coming from.
I'll ask one more question and then I'll give you the final word, Randall. When it comes to working with clients and they're telling us their goals, what we see often is the problem that they're expressing. Those are like symptoms of like the real problem that maybe we see that they don't see. Um, I know that certainly we want to be transparent with our clients and be lockstep in terms of goals, but how often does it play where you sort of have a strategy, or does it play that you need to get them somewhere? Like, is it very important that the client's goals be your goals, or can you, as the experienced coach, sort of guide them where they need to go without being so explicit if they can't see the forest through the trees at this time?
So probably it's an interesting question because it speaks to the how of coaching, not just the how of training, right? So as a trainer, you get up in front of a group of people, whether it's a management team or new managers or 1,000 people in a big room, whatever it is, or virtual, and you say, here's the knowledge, and as a very experienced trainer, you know how to help them learn it in a way that they retain it a little bit better and hopefully enjoy the process, etc. Coaching is different. And the reason why it's different is in that methodology. Can you ask questions? So when the client says, here's the issue that I really would like to get some clarity on. So you can ask some questions about their experiences or what the issue is, and you can add your own hypotheses. Is it possible that the reason for such and such is this? If it were solved this particular way, would, and then fill in the blank, right? And so you can get your ideas in, but in the form of questions in a way that helps them explore areas that they might not have thought of, right? If a client comes to me and says, I've got this problem of such and such, I think this is the solution, I'm going to implement, I just wouldn't mind that some perspective before I press the button. Okay, in that case, you're not into the pure question answering mode. You may bring up some experiences, some of your past experience. Oh, I had that problem in such and such, or another client had this problem, or gee, when I was consulting back in the day, this was the issue. Here's how we solved it. But we may also say things like, let's talk about the impact on that on your clients or on this particular group of employees, or how would that impact your brand? And asking questions from these different angles that they might not have thought about because they thought about it as merely a solution to a point problem, okay, can sort of, I don't know if the word is robustify what they're going to do, but sort of walk down some other paths. What if we looked at it this way? Okay, well, okay, it makes sense what you're saying. I agree. Okay, let's talk about implementation. What does that look like? How about this? I think you could do it this way and this way as well, right? Well, what if we did this? Does it need to be you who does this? Is this not something we can delegate, right? So and so you mentioned has got a skill in such and such. What if you gave it to them, right? So yeah, I might have some ideas. Oh my God, they're just dealing with the symptom, but the root problem is something else. Well, thank you. That's part of that conversation, right? And it's not a question of my goals versus a client's goals. It's a question of together we might be able to see things like 1 + 1 = 3 that perhaps they by themselves might not have seen. That's why they've got the coach, right? And me, because I don't know the intricate details of their organization, but I know enough about business and business growth that all of a sudden I could make some suggestions that may uh, may mean success in terms of achieving their particular goals.
Final question, Randall, I'll give you the last word. If there is a perspective shift to be had about business growth coaching, what do you want people to know to help them see the most acceleration and most growth from their businesses within their business growth coach relationship?
So, two parts to that answer. Number one, for those who have not done this before, find somebody, reach out and ask for a test drive, a free test drive. Any coach worth their salts will give you a chance to and should be willing to put some skin in the game, right? And not as a sales or a discovery kind of call, but as one where you can actually see whether it's going to work and experience it yourself personally. So that's for the people who have not done it. For the people who are in a relationship right now, I say good for you. You've made a decision. Hopefully it's working out well for you. If there's going to be perspective shift, it would be this. That particular coach has got, they only know what they know. And they, like you, don't know what they don't know. And so if you've got a coach right now who's doing fine, my question is fine what you need? Or is extraordinary what you need? And not to say that you should make any changes, but you should ask yourself at what point are we ready to make a change, and just to get that different perspective. Because it could very well be that is what's going to make your business um, grow significantly or address the issues that you brought, or at least just getting that perspective on how to get that next level. So that's how I would suggest those people look at it.
Okay, well, thank you, Randall, for sharing all these interesting perspectives on the coaching industry. And thank you to everyone who listened along with us here today. If any of the issues we talked about resonate with you, if you're curious about working with Randall as a business coach, please reach out. We'd be happy to have a conversation, share some resources, or get you booked for that test drive. And if you'd like to get more content from us, including the invites for our live monthly leadership Q&A sessions like this one, please email us at info@randallcraig.com, follow us on LinkedIn, and we'll see you in the next session.